This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is an inspiring leader whose story of being a star athlete with a full ride may impress you, but it's the challenges and how she met them head on that will teach you. She has been an entrepreneur, a corporate executive, and now the CEO of her own firm. She did this all while overcoming her own personal demons and believing in the idea that life is happening for us. Please welcome founder and CEO Micah Abigail, founder and CEO of Micah Abigail, Micah Smith.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
It's so great to have you.
That's quite
here.
the introduction. Wowza.
well, after reading your story,
yep.
I was like, there's so much to it, and it's really cool because, like I said, being a star athlete, there's so many expectations and so much pressure that's put on you, and I think that in that moment, and you'll speak on this, in that moment of being a star athlete, it's like, oh my goodness, the future is yours. It's abundant for you. But meanwhile, internally, there's something that's different that's happening. And I think it's a story that resonates with so many because we see that happen with athletes, right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I love it. I guess why not? We're talking about the athletic journey, your athletic journey. Why don't we jump into that for a second?
Sure. Where do you want me to start?
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, why don't we start from the beginning then?
Okay.
Right? Because you also talk about, you mentioned in your forum here about your upbringing and your childhood and how it was different than the kids around you. Mm-hmm. But yet it didn't affect you and your personal joy, which I think speaks to and sings to what you are today and who you are today. Yeah. So why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and where you grew up?
Yeah. So I was born in Denver, Colorado, and I grew up in Arvada, Colorado. And it's a little small suburb outside of Denver. It's about 20 miles northwest of the city? I haven't been there in so long.
Sorry.
Okay, perfect.
You're good.
Perfect. And so I grew up there, and very humble beginnings, to say the least. And my parents are amazing people, and I am such a daddy's girl. And so my dad is this big giant. He's a 6'7" beast, 260 pounds, and everything my dad did, I wanted to do. And so ever since I remember, it was Dad was big into basketball. I was big into basketball until I got my first black eye. And then I was like, not so much. And then Dad was like, I want to be a helicopter pilot. And I was like, I want to be a helicopter pilot. Dad was like, hey, I love bodybuilding. So I actually did pursue bodybuilding. So everything my dad was into, I was into. And then he got me into volleyball at a very young age. And it was actually at our church league. I still remember we were at this little gym, and they had carpet on the floor of the gym. And my dad picked up the volleyball and started hitting the ball. And then I started hitting the ball. And then one thing led to another. He's like, we got to pursue this. I think this is something you could be really, really good at. And so volleyball became my sport of choice. But ever since I can remember, I was always moving. I mean, my dad had me in every sport under the sun: gymnastics, volleyball, basketball, soccer, swimming. I mean, you name it, I did it. My dad would take me to the park, and I'd be out there with all the boys playing football. And he was just so proud. He initially wanted a boy, the firstborn, and wanted a boy. No big deal there. Obviously, I'm not a boy. And so, but he trained me like he would a boy. So I was just this super, tomboy. And so everything my dad did, I did. I dressed like a boy. I definitely had a lot of male attributes, So my childhood, though, it was as humble as it was, I never knew, it just never resonated with, we were so happy. You know what I mean? We were just so happy, just doing things that were important, which is spending time with your loved ones. And So I have a lot of fond memories of my childhood, especially when it comes to my upbringing and time spent with my family. But I mean, we were just such an athletic household, but that really stemmed from my dad, which was pretty cool. So
you said you never knew what?
Never knew that not going maybe out to eat or having brand new clothes or going on vacation, I never knew I was missing anything. Like shopping at the thrift store was normal and exciting because you just never knew what treasure you were going to find. I never knew what I was missing. And to this day, I still don't feel like I ever missed out on anything. I feel like I lived the best life, but I was always surrounded by kids who had, like, I always thought I was the richest poor kid. And which was my family is amazing in the sense my father spent his entire inheritance on my sister and I so we could go to private school. And so we go to private school with all these kids who have, much nicer homes and maybe fancier cars. And like, my mom, she had the car and my dad would take the bus, like that kind of thing. And like, so we had this insane upbringing because my parents were like, our kids are first. And I think that example has sat with me in such a way that you can't even begin to fathom, I think, what is being instilled in you at such a young age when you're seeing this example of just complete selflessness. And that was a really cool thing to experience. And it's really turned me into the person that I am today. And I love giving to people. And I didn't really understand where that came from until I really was able to reflect back on my past and see what my parents had done for myself at such a young age. But they also, I noticed even my grandmother. So my grandmother, my dad's mom, so she had a real hard time and she grew up in a trailer. She had a trailer. So we would go visit her in her trailer and we'd be jumping. All I remember about her is she was this warm, amazing, loving woman. And we'd be jumping up and down on the couch and eating M&Ms and watching Ghostbusters and having the time of our life with this woman. But she would save the entire year so she could take our family out to this place called Fur's Cafeteria.
You mentioned that.
Yep. It was an all-you-can-eat restaurant. And she would save for the entire year and that just to take us out to eat. For that. And it was just like, to me, it's so amazing. Like I come from such a family of givers. And again, so like I felt very rich because like we were always like, we always had food. We always had time with our family. Like there wasn't a whole lot of strife in our home. It was a peaceful place to grow up, even though we didn't have much. Simple. I think my dad he made like $40,000 a year and supported a family of 5.
Yeah. You said your sister, so you have more siblings, obviously.
I have more siblings. Yeah. And I mean, it was amazing. But we were playing club volleyball and we were doing all the things that rich kids do. But we weren't rich, we never went on vacation. We never had new clothes. It was just, it was pretty amazing. But I never knew. I just, I loved my life so much. And yeah. There's so much to it.
I want to come back to this concept of you never knew, because I think it goes into, maybe getting ahead of myself here for a second, but I just mentioned in your intro here about believing that life is happening for us.
Yes.
And there's so much to say about what you just said about you never knew. I'm just interested in what your dad did for work. What kind of profession was he in?
Yeah. So my dad, actually, he worked at a company. So it was a phone company back in the day. So it went from Mountain Bell to US West to Quest. And so we worked for a phone company for a very, very long time. And then I think it was like 24 years into it, they laid him off. And it was devastating because at that time, in those years, they were still giving people pensions once they hit a certain number of years on the job.
Right.
And so he missed a pension by, I think, like 6 months. They laid him off prior to that. And it was brutal. But then fast forward to today, he's a field service engineer, which is amazing. He's self-taught and he makes like much more than what he did when we were younger, but that put him into the position where he was. And so he's actually contracted out by the government now and he does very, very well for himself. I'm very proud of him. But he doesn't have a college degree. But yeah, he worked for the phone company, and he would just handle, customers all day, every day.
I mean, just again, like, and it's so funny because that's not why I was asking the question in terms of the happening for us.
Yeah.
But you think about, and you're going to talk about your own challenges in your life too, but you just think about that of getting laid off 6 months before getting a pension and how devastating that is.
Yeah.
Family of 5, putting food on the table, trying to do everything, like you said, taking the bus to work, doing everything. And I think, in that moment, it could be total like give up on life, right? Like, this is over and everything. But then meanwhile, it was really a blessing in disguise to where he actually was able to elevate to a job that he earns more than he ever did previously.
Yeah.
Like a testament to this whole like everything happens for us.
Yes.
I also feel I want to add to this part of like everything happens for us too, that you also have to take action.
100%.
Right?
Yes.
You gotta make some choices. Like again, there was a choice there that Dad could have made of like feeling devastated and depressed and just going out, giving up, kicking cans, being like, peace, family, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sure, that could have been a choice, but he didn't. He looked at it as, all right, how do I make good on this? So that's really cool.
Heck yeah.
So let's get back to this upbringing, this childhood, and getting to being a star athlete.
Sure.
So
that's very nice of you. I wouldn't call myself a star athlete, but
okay, we got some limiting beliefs we got to work through here, because I mean, you got a full ride scholarship for volleyball.
I did.
To college.
I did.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a star athlete. You know, at least in your town,
sure,
people knew who you are. Also, you're tall, right? So you were probably really good.
I was a shrimp compared to the girls.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 5'8.5" for a woman in volleyball. It's pretty short. Especially for a front row.
Wow.
Yeah. All the other girls in my position, because I played in the outside hitter position, all the other women were 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot, 6'2", 6'7". I had a girl on my team who was 6'7".
Wow.
And it was just, I was a shrimp. So I had a lot of grit.
I play basketball, and I always think I feel bad for people who are that tall in life and don't become professional athletes, because it's like at 20 it's awesome, and then probably like now, sometimes I hit my head getting in the car and I'm 5'10".
Right. So true. So true.
Like, that can't be fun. 6'7" at 40 something years old.
Yeah, if you don't use it. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's a tough one.
But good for concerts.
Good. Yeah. Right? You can see whatever you want to see. Yeah. But so you had this, like what I was thinking when you were talking about all of this and doing all this stuff with your dad, this high energy. And I mean, even today, like coming into the studio, I could feel this energy that you have. Like you've always had this like high energy.
True story. That's
right?
God's gift to me.
And it seems like part of what your dad was doing was helping you harness it. And I'm interested in that for you of like, did you feel that way? Like that you were kind of like harnessing this energy and trying to find a way to control it all?
Interesting thing with the energy. Oh my goodness. So my father used to say about me, he used to compare me to a stallion when I was younger. And he said, Micah, you are so beautiful, but I swear, he's like, unless you're tame, he's like, it is just brutal to deal with you. I have had always, I think it's a very natural thing that God just blessed me with, and harnessing that energy, I think, is something that I've struggled with my entire life. So I think, and even when I deal with people who have similar personalities to mine, I don't try to control the energy. I just try to steer it in the right direction, or I try to motivate or inspire instead of like put into a box. Because I think people with the type of energy that I have, I feel like if you try to smush the energy, then it just goes. It's like the analogy of like pushing a cream puff into a keyhole. You know what I mean? Like
it's just gonna it's
just gonna go everywhere.
Right.
So I feel like
I love that.
Yeah.
It's going to go everywhere.
It's going to go everywhere. So...
oh, my goodness. You just reminded me of something. Go ahead. Continue.
And so I think that my energy is something, my mom will even tell you, my energy is something... So when I was born, and I love birthdays. I love my mom talks about when I was born, because I think from the moment you're born, I feel like you're telling the world who you are, even though like the way you're born. And my mom will tell you that she's like, Micah, you flew out. She's like, you literally flew out. She's like, the doctor barely snapped his glove, and she's like, you flew out. Like, I was just ready for the world, And I think that, my energy was something that, like, I literally, like, in the womb was being created, Wow. And I think, harnessing my energy has always been a challenge, for sure. And I think, I definitely took some paths that were not so positive, and learning how to channel my energy in a positive direction has been instrumental to getting me to where I am today. But yeah, I think my dad, I was a real challenge for my father, to say the least.
But
he will tell you that.
And why I ask this is because I believe, as being a father of a highly energetic daughter right now.
Yes.
I have 2 daughters.
I hope you like your hair.
I have 2 daughters, Denise and Tenley, and Denise is just like my wife, who's 8. Denise is 8. Just like my wife, calm, very thoughtful, very methodical, quiet, very moves with purpose and at her speed.
Yeah.
And then you have Tenley, who is just like me, who is just high energy, out of control, quite honestly, right? Like yapping away, will tell you everything in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And something that I do with her, and I think you'll appreciate this with your keyhole analogy of smushing it through a keyhole. Is I never liked being told to calm down.
No.
Right?
No.
Right? And it's
I don't think anybody likes being told to calm down.
Nobody likes to be told to calm down, but we also understand why they were saying it, right? You're so hyper, you got to calm down, you got to calm down. And I just feel like that's so limiting, and it's not. Don't calm down, just channel it differently. Right. Right? And so when I speak with Tenley, that's what I try to say to her. I say, you have control over your body. You have control over your energy. Let's do something different. Let's make a different choice. And I feel like when you were telling your story about your dad, I feel like that's what he was doing with you, was he was channeling it. He was saying let's do volleyball, let's do baseball, let's do football, let's get that energy out. Yeah. And I feel and as we get into your story here, that was really great for you to be able to have these different channels. Oh, for sure. To get that energy out.
Oh my goodness gracious, yes. Yes.
Quick little funny story on your million pieces.
Yes.
You just gave me a throwback energy, super all and yap, and drove everybody nuts just like I did, right? And just like you did too, right? We just made them crazy. So she was in class one day and she got a new watch, and her watch started beeping and going off and just beep, 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 beep. And her teacher said, you better turn that watch off. And she's trying to turn it off. She can't figure it out. And her teacher goes, if you don't turn that watch off, I'm going to smash it into a million pieces. And Natalie just she's so quick. She just responds, if you smash it into a million pieces, you're going to have a million pieces going beep, 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 beep. And it's just it's what you just said. It's if you take that energy and you just try to push it into a keyhole, you're just going to get more somewhere.
Everywhere. It's going to surround you.
I love that.
That's good. That was a good story.
That was really good. So going into that, so let's go into, so you get the scholarship. You're playing at a high level, playing college ball, and as you go on in life into your 20s, you start experiencing new things and doing some different things. You had some entrepreneurial and selling bracelets, and then and you're gonna. I'm kind of just capping a little bit, so that you can recapping a little bit, so that you can take the story where you want to take it, and then you meet someone who really helped you start seeing things for your future and envisioning your future. So if you could share a little bit about that experience of going from volleyball and into the entrepreneurial journey, and then meeting this person who was able to help you see more out of life. Yeah.
So I didn't realize until much later in life that I had that entrepreneurial spirit. I really didn't realize it. And reflecting back, so back to the bracelets. So I was probably 4 years old, maybe 5 years old.
Wow. So it was even
and I
before.
was putting these little I was making these little bracelets, and I would get, this stuff from the craft store, and I was going around and I was selling these bracelets to my neighbors. And I still remember the people that were buying them, these awesome neighbors who dudes, in their 30s and 40s, and they're yeah, sure, I'll take 3 or 4. These are great, and I'm awesome. But I remember at such a young age, just wanting to be able to create something that was mine and to show some sort of a profit for it. And so volleyball, and so that was at a very young age. And then so I think my life was very I wouldn't call it rigid, but it was rigid. It actually was rigid. I don't want to call it rigid, but unfortunately it was
rigid
very,
or
very
structured.
Rigid. I'd consider it rigid.
Rigid, okay.
Our household, so I grew up in a very strict religious household. So very, very rigid, just box, always box thinking. Everything we did was box thinking. And I'm not a box thinker. And so once I got into college and I'm playing volleyball and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? It was all about what I was supposed to be doing, but it didn't feel right. It didn't sit right with me. Like it was, if someone was to say, "Who are you, Micah, outside of volleyball and outside of school?" I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I didn't know who I was. I had no experience in anything except for school and volleyball. I was never allowed to work. My parents were like, "No, you're going to get great grades and you're going to play volleyball. Like, this is your life. This is what you do." I didn't date. I didn't go out. I didn't really have that many friends. Like, I was just sports and school. And so it was extremely rigid. And I really, so it was a great childhood, and I wouldn't change it for the world because, again, everything happens for you, not to you. But as I broke away from that structure and I now had my ability to choose, I started choosing things differently, and that started to form my path. And I started, meeting people along the way that would eventually probably turned me into, the young woman I am today. And so I did meet someone whose name I will choose to leave out.
That's fine.
But he had taken 2 companies public at a very young age, and he was one of the most eccentric and gregarious people I had ever met. And he would speak, and I would hang on to every last word. His mentor was Bob Lang, Lang Snowboards, and I don't know if you're familiar with. So his mentor was Bob Lang, and he was always giving me words of wisdom, and these words of wisdom would help form my mindset, whether it was with dating or with my careers. And anytime I had an issue within a career, he would give me some sort of guidance to put me on a better path. And when we stopped communicating, it was interesting because I realized, like, for so long, it was almost like he was like my crutch. Like, anytime I felt like I didn't know the answer, I was always defaulting to him. And then when we stopped communicating, it was something where I was like, oh, I have the resources. It looks like okay, all right. Like, I guess I got this.
I can do this.
I got this.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting, the relationship that we had. He was a serial entrepreneur, and his children, he taught them, obviously the business world. And so his kids are very, very successful. And so it was pretty interesting that, I would, after having spent so much time with him, many, many years later, would go off and start my own venture. And do I attribute it to him? Maybe, maybe not. But I definitely learned so much from him, and he inspired me in so many ways and gave me a lot of confidence in certain ways and took away a lot of my confidence in others.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's the relationship side.
That's the relationship side. Yeah.
You mentioned you're not sure if you attribute it to you being an entrepreneur, to him or not. Mm-hmm. While in this experience with him that you had, mentor, we'll keep the relationship aside because we're really talking about them. I'm really more interested in the mentorship part of this, of these pearls of wisdom that he shared and these ideas and everything, and that you were able to lean on him. When you were asking him for this kind of, let's say, advice or, as you said, wisdom and everything, do you think it was because you were thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, or was it you were dealing with your own corporate life? Like, was there any maybe inkling of desire to do anything on your own when you were asking them these types of questions?
I think what I didn't even realize, so looking back, I'm very reflective, and I journal a lot and I read a lot, and I'm constantly reflecting back. You have to do it though, right? It's so important. It's really neat if you go back even like 10, 15 years and you look at stuff that you've written, you're like, oh my gosh.
Scary though.
It is. It really is. It really is. And I realized that I always had it in me, and I just didn't have the confidence yet to go out and embark on whatever it is I was going to embark on. But every single book I picked up, every single speaker that I listened to, everything that I listened to and that I trained myself in, it was all geared towards being an entrepreneur and doing your own thing. And I've always had that kind of a spirit where it's anybody that knows me really, really well knows that's not someone you really tell what to do. You just, because one, I don't really need the direction, and two, if you tell me what to do, I probably already did it times 10. So it's one of those things. nobody's really ever needed to tell me what to do. I've already, like every boss I've ever had, they've always been amazed or like, how is it that I've never had to tell you once what to do? Like you just do it and then some, it's just in it, it's inherent, so it's something where I think I've always had the spirit and the drive, but maybe I just didn't have the confidence, which came with my sobriety, for sure. But also I had to have the steadfastness, and I didn't find, the business that I'm in now, until I was probably just about to turn 30. And, that found me. I didn't find it, and I had no idea I would fall in love with that business the way I did. And you really have to just be so passionate about whatever it is, if you open up a company, like you better freaking love whatever it is that you're doing. And anybody who knows me knows I love my business. I love helping people navigate through the woes of credit because it impacts almost every, aspect of your life. And so I think it's always been there. And it was just a matter of timing. And I think that the importance of me being groomed to be the woman that I was supposed to be in order to be able to carry that type of load, I think that was what it was all about, is just the timing. And I think, everything along the way that's been happening from, just the rigidness of my life and having, such a structured upbringing, you can't be a successful CEO and business owner without structure. You cannot. I'm sorry. I don't know if anybody believes differently. Maybe they can prove me wrong, and I'd love to see it because I'm wrong a lot. But I really believe that structure has really made me so good at what I do, and I'm learning so much along the way. But I think it was always there. I really do. It just needed to be fine-tuned. I think that's all it really kind of comes down to.
We'll go back to a few of the things that you just mentioned in there, but on the topic of structure, and because you mentioned journaling, could you share a little bit about your daily structure, your processes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wish I could say I was the same every single day, but I am not, because I don't want to lie and say I'm the same every single day. I think I'm one of those people that kind of goes in waves. So I will tell you what is structured. I make my bed every day. That's that's an absolute must. I pray every day. The ones that I fluctuate with are meditation. So I meditated today. There's an amazing meditation that I love following by Tony Robbins.
Which one is it?
It's so I went to UPW and
Unleash Your Power Within, right?
Yes, and it was amazing. And at UPW, he does this 15-minute guided meditation. If you go on YouTube, you can find it. But he takes you through a breathing process. So it's a couple minutes of breathing, and then he takes you on a couple minutes of gratitude, like things that you're thankful for, and then he takes you through like a healing. So you're contemplating not only giving yourself healing, but others around you. And then you focus on 3 things that you're looking to accomplish. And then so at the end of the 15 minutes, you're like, okay, I'm primed and I'm ready to start my day.
Love that.
So I love my meditations. My meditations, when you don't have time to meditate, you should meditate the most. That's the one thing I've learned. I'm psycho about working out, and I do meal prep every single day. So my food is never a question. So what I'm ingesting as far as my food, and I try to get in at least 5 to 10 minutes of reading a day. There's times where I'm going to binge read though. Like I love to binge read, like on the weekends. Yeah. Oh man, I'll binge read like crazy. But my routine is 100%. There has to be movement. So there has to be workout. There has to be bed made. The house is left orderly. Obviously like ingesting all the right foods throughout the day, making sure, I'm on point with that. And then the one thing that I waffle with is the meditation. I'd like to do it every day, but I'd say I probably only do it 3 times a week right now. And then scribing and writing out, just either journals, right? So there's a great book out there by Hal Elrod called The Miracle Morning.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness gracious. When I picked up that book, I plowed through that book probably in a good, like half a day. A good friend of mine recommended it to me, and I instilled those principles into my day-to-day, into my daily life. And I was going through a really hard time, and I was like looking for something. And once I incorporated that structure into my life, everything changed. If you can prime yourself and get yourself prepped and ready for the day, it just... if you can run your day and not let the day run you, it changes things drastically. But it talks about scribing and the importance of scribing. So like my journaling it's different every time. Sometimes I just write down, sometimes I'm just writing out my goals like feverishly.
Yes.
Like I'll have like this wind of inspiration and motivation, and I'm like writing out my goals, my 1 year, my 5 year, my 1 month, my 1 day, my 1 week. And then there will be days where I'm just like, I'm talking about what just happened, like things that I really want to like, I need to cleanse, of just maybe problematic issues that I had or stuff that like something notable that I want to be able to go back and be like, wow, what a miracle. Something I want to reflect back on in 10 years. Like, remember this day.
Yes.
But it's so important to have these things. I mean, I have journals everywhere. They're like, they're all over the house. Like they're everywhere, in my office, in the bedroom, like, at another room, like they're everywhere. So it's if people aren't doing it, I encourage them to do it. It's one of the oldest forms of therapy. So.
Yeah, it really does help. Like I know that it's one of the ones that I fall off on with is journaling is writing it all down, because like I have all these great thoughts and everything. I'm like, oh man, and I gotta write it down, and then we get swept away with the activities of the day.
Right.
I go back to the idea of rigid versus structure. Of like, what is the difference? And I think, and this is going to be a question for you, but I think, there's a lot of, I guess, there's some negativity that comes out of rigidness, right? Because as you said, you didn't want to conform. You needed your freedom. You needed to break free. So there's some negativity that comes out of it. But I wonder if, from your perspective, if there's any positivity that also comes out of being rigid, and maybe that's how it correlates with structure.
Absolutely. I think rigid is something where I think you're unadaptable. So I think the only thing that I don't like about rigid is like, I think of it, my husband talks about it all the time. He's like, Micah, if you aren't bendable, you're going to break.
Right.
He's like, so you have to be able to just be pliable. And so always have your goals, but be flexible as to how you get there. So I like the idea of, and I was a very black and white thinker, because that's how I grew up, was black and white. And not everything is black and white. And I think the importance of not being so rigid and just, again, being more structured. So structure is like, there's a little more leeway,
right.
So there's no absolutes. And I think that structure is like, this is what it looks like. But, hey, if we sprinkle in, a cheat meal here, or if we sprinkle in like, hey, if you don't work out this day, it's okay.
Right.
Or if this meeting runs a little bit long, that's okay. Right. Or if this doesn't fit into your blueprint, that's okay. And I think that was actually one of the blueprint thing is a big one. I think that one thing I learned probably at around maybe 26, 27 is I stopped having a blueprint of what my life was supposed to look like. And even Tony Robbins talks about where unhappiness comes from. And unhappiness or anxiety or stress, it usually comes from a place where people have a blueprint of how they think things are supposed to work out. And it's not matching their blueprint. So they get unhappy, or they're stressed, or they're anxious. And so for me, I think not having this blueprint of how my life is supposed to be, and just being so grateful for what it is, that's made me into the woman that I am today. And that allows for this constant energy that you see. Because that's where it comes from, is it comes from a place of gratitude.
Right.
And knowing that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
I love that. And yeah, you were so adamant when I asked you earlier on about structure versus rigid. You were like, no, definitely rigid. And that's why I want to go back to it, because for me, same thing. Like I picture rigid as like exactly what you said it perfectly in terms of breaking. And then I picture structure as a scaffolding of like, this is the scaffolding, and things are going to happen in between. And similar to you, I grew up in Catholic school, and it was rigid, and it caused a lot of problems for me, because we're outside of the box. We're freedom thinkers. We're like, we need to just be able to, I remember one of my teachers called me a free spirit. There's Michael, he's a free spirit. And I'm like, yeah, that's me, But I also realized, and I am interested in this in terms of your sobriety and talking a little bit about this, but I also realized that when I did get that freedom, and I, was done with school and was on my own and living on my own, I was wild. I was out of control. And it was because I had no structure. Forget about rigid. I had no structure. I had nothing around me holding me back. I had a career. I was in the corporate world as well. I was making good money. I could do whatever I want. I could afford whatever I want, for whatever it was, that
I get it.
Like I couldn't get a yacht, but you know what I mean? And so it only led to problems for me. I mean, thankfully it didn't lead to any type of criminal problems. But it just led to me drinking more than I needed to, staying out later than I needed to. I talk about my journey of getting hired and fired on a regular basis. That was part of the whole play in it. Bad relationships. Until I found structure, Tony Robbins was actually one of the first ones that provided structure for me. I got his audio tapes and everything. And
it's amazing.
And took it like a class and then started creating structure. And as I started creating that structure, which was a long journey for me in many years, probably 7 or 8 years now, a long journey, is when things started falling into place per se, right?
Yes.
And so I bring this back to you in that you talk about your sobriety. And you did talk about like in your 20s, like just being wild and having your extravagant nights and fun, right? And so wild. And I could only imagine, right? And we're talking about structure now. So I'm interested in that for you in terms of, bring us into this like world of uncontrolled stallion, right? And then finally harnessing through structure.
So where do you want me to begin with this?
Whatever you'd like. It's your story.
So let's see.
And while I'm saying this for you to kind of like take a moment to think about it, is that
so much I can say.
in your intake form, you speak about your sobriety in a way of that it empowered you.
Yes.
And so I'm interested in that really because I think when I think about our viewers here, our listeners, by the way, for our listeners right now, I've been experimenting with doing Instagram lives while doing the show. So if you're watching, if you're on a Friday, if you want to try to catch this live, you might be able to. But I'm thinking about our listeners and our viewers and everybody in that they might be experiencing a time of wildness, right? And maybe not knowing how to harness it, but also maybe not seeing the positive benefit to once you do get sober. And for you, it was like just this awakening and such a powerful moment for you. And so I'm interested in how you can maybe share that.
Oh my gosh, yes. So on that note too, I wanted to share. I read so much, and Brendan Burchard.
Oh my goodness! Are you part of Growth Day?
I have the app.
Okay,
I do have the app. I'm not. I actually have not even used it yet.
Oh my goodness!
I downloaded
every day.
it. But
I listen to the Daily Fire every day.
Really?
Every day.
I love him so much. I love him.
He's the one who reminds me every day that I'm not journaling. Because every day I listen to Daily Fire and he's just like journal.
He's so
and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to journal today. And I'll go into journal every once in a while and I'll journal in there. I actually do it in there. But I love it. I'm so sorry to throw you off. But
I'm glad. We like all the same people.
Yes.
So we could have like endless conversations about this. But one of the things that stuck out to me in one of the books, 6 Habits, I think it's the 6 Habits of Growth or something like that.
Yes, that's how I met him. Well, that's how I was not met him. That's how I'd never met him. That's how I was introduced to his work.
He's so many great books.
Yes.
But in that book, he talks about how successful people, they do monotonous things really, really well. And they find joy in the monotony of things. And it's just, so I think so oftentimes, so what Tony Robbins often talks about too is, so when we're searching for that high or we're searching for that drink, whatever it may be, we're looking to alter our state. We're looking to change where we're at mentally, right? So we want to change our state. And for me, sobriety was a challenge. So my journey with sobriety was a long one. It was a long one. And I really don't know. I can't pinpoint a time when things became problematic for me. I can't pinpoint a time. But it went from fun to not fun. And so so for me to fast forward to when I got sober. So there was a very defining moment when I decided I needed to be sober. And so when I met my now husband, he met me when I wasn't drinking, but I wasn't sober. I was just not drinking. I still didn't think I had a problem. So all of these crazy things would always happen every time I would drink. And I would always wrestle with, oh, well, you know what? I work really, really hard. I have a really intense personality. So clearly it just makes sense, that, I go a little bit nutty because, listen, well, I deserve it. I work so hard, so why not? But at the end of the day, I knew what I was doing was wrong. But I wasn't willing to give up. Like I was like holding on to it because I just was like, but I want this outlet. I want this outlet, thinking it was something that I needed to have. And for me, drinking was not something that was normal. I didn't grow up around alcohol. My mother doesn't drink. My father doesn't drink. It was never in our home. I never normalized it. And so drinking for me, when I started drinking, it was just to fit in. That's all it was for. And it was just to be part of a group of people and to be more normal. And then as I, experienced normal, I was like, this sucks. I'm like, one thing I will never be is normal. Like, I believe if all of the crowd is going this way, I go the exact opposite. And so for me, sobriety, it was the most liberating thing on the planet. So when my husband met me, like I said, I wasn't drinking. And so he got to know the real Micah, the person who is punctual and consistent and loving and kind and loves God and loves her family. And then after a few months, I'm like, you know what? Just like most alcoholics do, I'm like, you know what? I can have a drink. No big deal. And so the first time it was normal. Well, the third time it wasn't. And then it just became a problem all over again. And so I started falling back into my old patterns, which is, alcoholism is a very isolating disease. And so you tend to push people away and you just want to be alone. And so I was at a breaking point. And one of my best friends, everybody was like, where'd she go? Because that's what would happen. I would just disappear. And so my best friend, she came over to my house and she's like, all right, I'm here with you until this is over. I don't know what's going to happen after these next few days, but I'm here with you while you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. And she had never seen me in that state. And she was no judgment, just nothing but love. And at first, the alcoholism side was like, no, I'm angry. I wanted to push my husband away. I wanted to push Daniel away. And then as my rational thoughts started to seep in as I got more and more sober, I was like, okay, so I've always said, these are the things that I'm meant to accomplish in my life. How are you going to accomplish these things with this part of your life that is limiting you in every aspect, way, shape, and form? As soon as I would see progress, that's when I would start drinking, right? I wasn't an everyday drinker. I was someone who would binge drink, right? So I wouldn't reach for a drink. I never craved it. Just I would start, it would be an event, and then I would start, and then I wouldn't stop for a while. And so I just had this come to Jesus moment where I was like, if this is truly the life that I'm meant to have, which is a great one, this has to go. It's over. And at that moment, it was like my ego stopped existing. And I called one of my friends who was very open about her sobriety at church. And I'd always wondered, I'd always asked questions because I kept having so many issues every time I would drink. And I would ask her about her story. And so I was like, Alana, I need help. I was like, I got to go to a meeting. And so I went with her to meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. And I was so sick while I was there because I was going through severe DTs, so I had really bad alcohol withdrawal. And so I was so sick while I was detoxing. And I just remember going to meeting after meeting. I was pouring sweat and I was discolored and I was just, just quiet and meek because you just don't feel good and you can't eat and your stomach hurts and you're just, it's miserable. You can't sleep, nothing. And, but I knew that if I was going to be the woman that I had to become, this cannot be a part of my life anymore. And I just knew it. And I just was I was so tired of, it's the most exhausting thing to fight internally with yourself as to if you can or can't have a drink. Because you have this constant battle. I'll drink less this time, or I'll hang out with a different group of people, or I'll only drink beer, or only drink wine, or there's so many things that you go through.
Right.
And when you just finally say, you know what, this is who I am, and you declare it, and it's pretty easy to turn away from the things that are holding you back. And I knew if I wanted to be with this man who I knew in my heart of hearts, this was the man I was supposed to be with. I knew it. I just knew it. And So from that point on, like I no longer looked at my alcoholism as an issue. I looked at it as this is something to overcome, and I will not be taken down by this. And so I got sober, and I'm coming up on 4 years.
Wow.
And
Congratulations.
I love it. I love it. And I've been called in so many different directions. Like I was on a national radio show talking about my sobriety. And the only person that can help someone who's struggling with this is someone who's in that position. So they say only an alcoholic can help another alcoholic. And so because of my message, whoever might be struggling with this disgusting disease, because it's rampant. It's rampant. I just want people to know it's something where if you make the choice to live in the present and be okay with it's okay to have a quote unquote boring life. It's the best life I've ever had.
Right.
Not waking up thinking like, oh my gosh, what did I do last night?
Right.
Just, oh my gosh, who do I have to apologize to? Like, oh my gosh, like what did I lose last night? So it, I don't even know if I answered the question properly, but.
Yeah, well, you did. I mean, first of all, I love that I answer it properly because, I was mentioned to you, I'm in a speaking course for my business. And one of the messages today, I was in a class this morning, and it was, don't seek perfection, seek clarity, right? So you can't answer it any better. You gave us some clarity as to what you experienced and what I drew from it in terms of a lesson learned there that I loved, and like you could see my eyes just go big when you said it, was if you want to be the person that you are striving to become, you had to overcome this challenge.
Yeah.
And I think about that so often. Like I gave you my little bookmark here,
Yes,
and these
I
are
love
like
this.
3 tips to develop inner confidence. And when I talk about habits, what I try to share with people, and what you just shared with us just now, is it's not about adding more habits into your life.
No.
Like, yeah, there are some good habits that maybe if you don't meditate or if you don't journal, they're good habits to add into your life if you have the room for them, right?
Right.
And there is room for them is what I try to say, and what you just shared here. There's room for them if we could eliminate the habits that don't serve us.
Yes.
And so what you're sharing with us in your story of sobriety is that, look, you could have partied. You could have been, like you just mentioned, right? This corporate executive who does well for herself and has a great time on the weekends and just is the party girl, right? Is the girl that everybody knows is at the bar or at the party and is like the ball of fun. And oh my goodness, get around Micah. She's got the story, or she's going to create a story for all of us in 2 years, right? That we're going to be talking about. Get around her. And you're like, you could still have done that.
Sure.
But would you have gotten to where you want to be? And the answer is no.
Never.
And that's kind of, what I drew from this, and I think is just a wonderful part of your story, is that you were like, I got to change this. I got to remove it and do something different. And so, yes, you certainly did answer the question. I actually have another question for you from a personal side on my end. Is again, there's so many similarities in us in terms of that personality of like that fun party person, that like, outside of the box, this like high energy and all that other stuff. And for me, very similar to you in that, I mean, I don't know your stories, your drunk stories, but I know for me, like I had drunk stories where it's just like, they were a ton of fun and everything. But yeah, you wake up in the morning, you're like, who do I need to apologize to? What did I do? How did I get here, right? And I was just sharing a story in Toastmasters recently because we were just talking about how people perceive us. And I was just saying, it was really like, have you ever seen someone and thought of them one way, but then found out something different about them? And the way that I answered it was more about like perception of ourselves, of like, the story is, I thought I was so funny and so cool in this moment. I was drunk, right?
Sure.
And I thought I was so funny and so cool in this moment, and I was impressing this girl and I was wowing her because I'm just so funny, right? And this girl ends up turning out to become my future wife, right? Who I'm married to today, and today's her birthday. Happy birthday, Devin.
Happy birthday.
And I remember we were talking about that day once a couple years later after we're married or whatever, and I was just like, oh yeah, wasn't that so funny? Da da da. And she goes, Michael, I hate to tell you this, but honestly, during that moment, I literally, like, she's like, I remember that vividly. I literally was contemplating breaking up with you. She's like, that I was so embarrassed by you in that moment, right? That I was going to break up with you. And, like, again, back to perceptions of like, in that moment, I'm the funniest guy in the world.
Right.
But meanwhile, the girl who I end up marrying because she's my dream girl, right? For every reason, every good reason.
That's amazing.
Was going to break up with me.
Yeah.
So perception. And so where the question comes in is that for me, so I lived this life. And then later, as I started developing and developing good habits, I started eliminating drinking and started realizing like, hey, I don't want to be like that, right? So I started, like you said, limiting it and changing it to a point where actually last year, on her birthday, because she was just like, you're not going to have a drink with me on my birthday? I was like, all right, I'll get a drink with you. Last year was like the last drink I ordered. Was with her. It wasn't because I thought I had a problem, nor do I think today I have a problem until talking with you, which is where the personal question comes up. It wasn't because it was just more of like, I was just like, this is the person I want to be on stage when I speak about building habits that are productive and everything. I want to be that person.
Yes.
And so for me, drinking isn't productive. And so I just don't drink anymore.
Right.
But I wonder, when you had mentioned before, you said, I wasn't drinking, but I wasn't sober. And so I'm wondering, like, a little bit of self-reflection here as you were saying that. I'm like, I don't drink anymore. I don't crave alcohol. I was just like you. Like, I never craved it. I just drank it on the weekends. And like, once I started, I kept going. Yeah. I'm just wondering, maybe on a little analysis from you of like, am I just not drinking, but I need to be? So I wonder. I'm just curious on that, on your take on that.
It's such a personal journey.
Right.
And for me, it was because it was such a problem for me, and I just hadn't come to that realization yet that if I drank again, it could end up to the point where maybe I wasn't around anymore, and so I think they call it being like a dry drunk, basically. So it's like, you're dried out, but you still have an intention of potentially repeating those same mistakes. Because someone like myself, right? So one is too many and 1,000 is never enough, is what we say.
Okay.
And so for someone like myself, not drinking, it was just more so as a temporary thing where it needed to be an absolute.
I understand. Yeah. It's I always have that question because it does. I wonder about it sometimes because I'm like, is it or is it not? And well, she talks about it openly, so it's fine. So, but my cousin who is sober, and I remember calling her once during my binging days and being like, hey, do I have a problem? And she said, well, tell me why you think that. I said, because there's so much booze around the house. She goes, no, you're good. And I go, why? She goes, because it wouldn't be there. Because it wouldn't be there if you did. But yeah, I was just interested in that and that sober versus not drinking. And I think, and I like how you put it too in terms of intentionality of like, what's my intention behind it? And I think that again serves our audience here in that, like, what is your intention behind whatever you do and the choices you make? And like, for me, it's an intention of like, I just want to live into the person that I say I am. Yes. Right. And being that productive person. So I thank you so much for sharing that story.
Yeah, I love sharing about that part of my life.
It's also kind of like, I think like, and it goes back to these conversations and I have them so often with my cousin because we're like so much the same and we talk about like hitting that rock bottom, right? And you know it. And I believe, and you go back to happening for us, like it did happen for us because like otherwise you have those people who live in cruise control their whole lives because they never had that like abrupt awakening, right? So it's like, it's necessary sometimes. And we're very fortunate for that.
Yeah.
What brought you to Tony Robbins?
Oh my gosh. Tony Robbins, I don't even remember the first time I heard him, but I've always been captivated by Tony. Literally pick up anything and everything I can possibly get my hands on that he does. And then my experience with UPW was unreal. And it was kind of a dream come true because my husband went with me and we did the fire walk together. And so we had this immersive experience together. And that was honestly a dream come true for me. But I've always gravitated towards that self-help. Like anything and everything I pick up, it always tends to be like in that self-help category. Yeah. And Tony has just always blown me away. I mean, he's just someone to be so respected and revered, and his story is just so compelling. And anytime I still remember, like back in my early days when I was like, finding myself, I would always just have on like the tapes of the Les Brown and the Tony Robbins and the Brian Tracy's and like that was just my thing, like that was just my thing. And Tony has just always been his insight has always resonated with me in such magnitude. He's brilliant. He's brilliant.
That's so cool. I love self-development too. It's something that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah.
And you mentioned to me earlier, I say I'm passionate about it because I was talking about my speaking career.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you want to get out and speak and you love public speaking and you love sharing your story and you want to empower other women like yourself. And so I'm interested in that aspect of your future in speaking. And what is the message that you want to get out to women?
That's
I thought I heard you say women, right?
Yes.
Before. Yes. Okay.
And it's so funny because I've actually I've toyed with the idea, I write it feverishly down. I'm like, no, men need to be there too. And I'm like, no, just women. I'm like, no, men too. But either way, I think whatever part of my story resonates with someone because I've overcome so many obstacles in my life and I didn't do it alone. And I think the message that I want to convey to people is that there's hope. I think that in this day and age, I feel like, everyone's so downtrodden and, rightfully so. We're in a time and an era where we're more lonely than ever. There's so many statistics about loneliness and how lonely people feel. But really the message is hope. And I think that's also why I gravitate towards the credit piece because it feels hopeless when you don't understand something. And I think hope is the biggest thing, because we're all going through something. If you just sit down and you take the time to speak with anyone, everybody's going through something, everybody. And I don't think a lot of people have hope. And I think when you brought up, do people oftentimes they look at something or someone and they have this idea or this, someone might look at me and be like, she's probably never struggled a day in her life. And I think one of my greatest things to be able to share with people is like, oh, let me lay out some of my story for you. And they're like, oh my gosh, and so I think having that message of hope and being real, with people and just being like, listen, here are my struggles. I am a human, and I struggle with all the same things that you do. I think that people need to hear that from someone that they might view as someone who maybe just doesn't struggle, and I think to hear that, I think is just, for me, like you look at someone like Tony, you know what I mean? And you hear his story and you're like, oh my gosh, like I can relate to that. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And I don't know how I'm going to be used, but even before I came here, I just was like, please use my words to speak to people in a way that they need, they need to hear. Just whatever message that someone needs to hear today, like please, like let it touch the right people, because so many people out there are struggling, and I just want everybody to know that there truly is hope out there.
I love that. I always say that when people ask me, how many people listen to your show? And I'm like, I don't know, millions. No, I'm just kidding. I always say, like, honestly, I don't care because all I care about is that one person that listening heard the right episode for them. That helped impact them.
Yeah.
I was asking you about Tony because, like, for me, like, I mean, I always heard about him and, it being in sales. You have the Brian Tracy's and all that stuff and Zig Ziglar. Zig Ziglar was a fun one. Bob Proctor.
Yeah.
But the one that changed my course was Netflix put out I'm Not Your Guru.
Oh, it's such a good movie.
And I was just like, I was struggling with wanting to watch it or not. I was just like, I don't feel like, And I was like, all right, fine, I'll watch it. And I did. And I was just like, you know what? I need that in my life. And that's when I got into the course. And it really changed the course of my life. I want to go back to your public speaking because you mentioned a couple things there. And one, I said this to you earlier, but it needs to be said again. When I sat through your presentation, so I was invited to an event that Virginia Corbett put on, who also was on the show. She's awesome. She's really cool. And you came in as a credit expert. And, I just came with no expectations of anything. I had been to some things like this before. I was coming more of a networking thing with my background. And I experienced your presentation, and it was so different than what I've ever seen before in these kind of environments, right?
Sure.
Like, yeah, if I'm paying tickets to go see a speech or a presentation, I expect what you put on.
Yes.
But you did it, for these real estate people, these realtors and everything, in a way that was just, you conveyed the message so clearly. You were so confident up there. You were so well spoken. And you mentioned to me earlier about nerves of being of impromptu. You had questions that came from left field.
Sure.
And you answered them so knowledgeably and so well that you do handle impromptu speaking really well. So I'm trying to, what I'm saying here is that I want to give you credit and props
Thank you so
because
much.
you are a fantastic public speaker. And,
Thank you.
my background in Toastmasters is to give feedback to speeches sometimes. So sometimes we sign up for the feedback person. What is it called? Oh my goodness. I'm drawing a blank on that one. No, doesn't matter. So I do analyze speeches a lot. Like I'll watch them or I'll listen to a presentation for education. And then sometimes I turn the corner and I'm like, wait a second, what's going on here? And for yours, that's when it happened. I was like, she's polished. She's got it. So you do have like an awesome stage presence.
Thank you.
That I think you need to know.
Thank you.
For your future with what you're going to be doing. Back to the men versus women thing.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one.
Yeah.
In that, who's listening now, entrepreneurs, business leaders, executives. And I think, in the speaking world, we hear the message of, if you're speaking to everybody, you're speaking to nobody.
Yes.
Right? And it's sales, as I say, if you're trying to sell to everybody, you're selling to nobody. I was in a presentation recently on branding, and I love the way that this gentleman did it, Rob. He's actually going to be on the show coming in a couple of weeks. And what he did was he said, all right, everybody, who here has an Apple phone? And half the room raises their hand. And then he says, who here has an Android? Half the room raises their hand. Who here wears Nike? Half the room, right? Who here wears Adidas? Half the room. I mean, it wasn't half, but you're getting my point.
Yeah.
And that he's like, so what makes you think you can get everybody?
Yeah.
Right? What makes you think you can get everybody?
Yeah.
And it's not to put anybody down, but
it's a great
wasn't it
analogy.
so clear?
That makes sense.
And I think when we go back to your men versus women, it's not that your story wouldn't resonate with men.
Yeah.
It will resonate with men, right? Like, I mean, your presentation resonated with me and your story resonates with me, right?
Yeah.
It's just that your focus is on women because that's who you could speak with and that's who resonates with you.
Sure.
And you'll have that. I was speaking with a friend recently about Mel Robbins.
I love Mel.
Right?
I love Mel. The 5-second rule.
Yeah. And she asked me, she's like, do you know Mel Robbins? I said, yeah. She goes, oh, okay, usually she speaks to women. I was like, yeah, but I listen to her.
Yeah.
So you're going to get the people that come in but your focus to build your business and build your platform is with women. And that's great, right? And I think that's awesome. It's like...
I love that. I think I don't want to exclude anyone.
I know.
That's my big thing. I don't want to exclude anybody.
Yeah.
But I like how you say that, though, because you do have to hone it in.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out who you want your audience to be. And I think it is interesting. I've noticed when I speak in my women's groups, it's different than when I speak when men are there. You say things differently, and there's certain things that you actually won't say in front of a man that you would say in front of a woman. I think there's a little bit more liberty as far as like what you can say in a women-based audience.
And I think the same for men in that, like, for me, it's never been an issue. Like, I could be in a room full of women and I'm totally comfortable.
Of course.
I could be in a room full of men and I'm totally comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, like my cousin and I, she's a girl and we were peas in a pod. So it's just never been. But I think, in terms of men, I think that when women are in the room, it's probably harder to be vulnerable. And with what you're trying to do, or what most people are trying to do when they're trying to help others, we need total vulnerability.
Yes.
Like, you need to just let it all out. Because if you don't put all the cards on the table and you're holding one back, like sobriety, right?
Yeah.
If you're holding that one back, it's incredible. Can't help you. There's nothing we could do here.
100%. Yeah, you're 100% right.
I follow another woman who, I'm interested in this for you with bodybuilding. I want to get to bodybuilding with you. That was another interesting one that I want to get into. So we're gonna segue to bodybuilding. This is gonna help me. So I follow a couple doctors online about intermittent fasting because I love intermittent fasting. It works well for me.
It's the best.
It doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not preaching it to everybody.
Yeah.
It works well for me. But Dr. Mindy, she focuses solely on women. But I listen to her stuff because she's got great tips. So I don't feel excluded by her, but like there are things that women experience with fasting that are different than men.
Very much
and so she guides them through that. So those episodes I just don't listen to. I'm like, but I'm going to listen to other stuff.
This one about the womenly hormones.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm good. Although it does help me understand my wife a little bit better.
Oh, that's amazing.
It does. There are some things
amazing.
that help me understand women just in general a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in bodybuilding because you did get that later in life. Like you said, you did become a bodybuilder.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It was something so funny at a very young age. I grew up, so at 4 years old, right? So I walk into my classroom with the Arnold Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia Book of Bodybuilding. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. And everybody in class is like, you're insane. And they're like, what is this? Right. And this is back in the 80s. And so I'm looking at that at a young age. And then my mom has Rachel McLish, Perfect Parts. And she's beautiful. I love Rachel McLish. And so at a very young age, I'm seeing these pictures of these people that I just find captivating. I'm like looking at their bodies and their physiques and I'm like, wow, like that's so cool. And so before I turned 30, I was like, that's it. I just have to do it. And I was in the early stages of my credit career. And so at that point, I was based out of Colorado and I was flying all over the country.
Oh, wow.
And I was doing these big presentations. So that's what I did for the last decade is I flew all over the country teaching and I love it. I love it. And part of me wanting to do this was I always have struggled when I hear people say, I don't have time. I don't have time. And they constantly would make these excuses as to why they weren't pursuing things that they'd always wanted to pursue. And I'm like, part of me was just like, I'm going to show you, what you can really do if you make sure you have some sort of a structure in place because you can accomplish so much more than you ever thought possible. And so I did my first show at, I wasn't quite 30 yet, and I hired a young lady who's amazing, Crystal Rose Harvey. I will never forget this girl. She's amazing. And she is a former IFBB pro. And she took me through my first show. She gave me, my diet plan, my workout plan, and I followed it and did it all whilst on the road. And I would land in New York and I would, put all my stuff at my Airbnb, and I'd only stay at Airbnb, so I would have a place where I could cook all my food. So I would put all my stuff there, I'd go grocery shopping, pick up all my groceries, go to the gym, and then I would run my so it was just this crazy whirlwind. And I love the bodybuilding world so much. And so I did well. And so I took a little mini break and then I moved to New York. So I was still living in Colorado at the time. Then I moved to New York with my career. And when I came out here, I was like, okay, now I really want to pursue this. And I really want to take this a little further. So I hired a really aggressive coach here on Long Island. And so went through a rigorous training, and I did so much more than I ever thought I was capable of. I had no idea my body was capable of looking like that. Because I still remember going to my coach's house, and him and his wife were there, and I was like, do I really need to do that much more? I'm like, I look pretty good. They're like, no, you look good, but yeah, you got a ways to go. And this is naive me not realizing really truly what these people put their bodies through. And so me not thinking I had a long way to go, 9 months later, I was finally ready for stage. So 9 months of 3-day workouts, heavy depletion, tons of supplements. And I turned into this just
Hulk woman.
Picturesque, just Greek goddess.
Wow.
I was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't know my body was capable of looking like this. And it was the healthiest unhealthy thing I've ever done. I looked amazing and I looked freakish, which I like. But the problem with bodybuilding is that you get tunnel vision. And nobody else matters because nobody else can matter, and nothing else matters except for what you're doing. So it's a very selfish sport. So there's just no room. And talk about rigid. You can't eat out. You can't, do anything if it, messes up your workouts. I was back in that, box of rigid, and I think that it ended up causing me some more issues later on, because after I stopped bodybuilding, I ended up going on one of my benders again. So I think it was like one of those. And again, you get this very unhealthy view of what you're supposed to look like. And so I struggled for a very long time as I started to become, more and more natural looking, to be able to just be comfortable in my skin again, just looking quote unquote normal, but I wouldn't consider myself normal looking. I'm in very good shape, and but normal for me, know. And but it was the best, worst thing I ever did. I wouldn't take it back. I would do it 100 times over, and I wouldn't do it again now. But so glad that I did it. It taught me so much of what I'm truly capable of, structure. I learned food like I've never learned food before. I know my body so well. I know fitness, and just, it's amazing. It was amazing. And I would encourage anyone, if you can do a natural show, what I love about bodybuilding is that you're always in a deficit. And always being in a deficit is so good for the mind. It's so good for the mind. Like, you can teach yourself what you can truly live without. You just look at life a different way. Like, because we're such a surplus society, it's just, I want what I want when I want it now. And this is all about delayed gratification. You can't have all these things. And I always remember my coach would say, pros don't cheat. And because of the personality that I have, I was like, okay, like, you would see the difference between a girl who would be snacking, outside of her meal prep versus a girl who never did. You would see it. Like they say, right? What you eat, you wear in public. Well, on that stage, what you eat, you wear. And you can tell the people who really stuck to the plan and the people who just weren't ready to be on that stage. It was so eye-opening on so many levels. And I'm so glad that I did it. And it really set me up for success today, big time.
Yeah, speak to us about that. The correlation between that mental strength that you had to have, that tunnel vision, and then founding your company. I'm interested in the correlation there, because I see it for you.
Tell me, what do you see?
What do I see?
Yeah.
So the reason why is because I also love the physique, and I love the muscular physique. I really do. I was fanboying on my last guest, her husband. I saw a picture of them together, and I was just like, I want to work out with that guy.
Oh my gosh, you would be obsessed with my husband.
He's jacked. I love it, right? Like, I'm not, and I'm not. I don't have a desire to be a bodybuilder at all. But like, when I see like just the different muscles and the male and the female, like, it's all the same to me in that sense of like, just like, it's just really cool to see and beautiful. And I was always drawn to those kind of magazines in the supermarket. My grandmother would be like, what are you looking at? Right? I'm like, I don't know. They're really cool. It's like that, and sports cars. I was like, really cool. The muscles are just so neat. But for me, so I always exercised, I always worked out and everything. And today, with this new awareness, right, of understanding about how everything works for us, of like whether it's journaling or meditating or exercise even, how it works for us. And it gives us this mental strength. And like, so I mentioned fasting, right? And people ask me about fasting. In that, like, so you don't need to lose more weight or whatever it is. And I'm like, well, first of all, the weight that I'm at is because I'm fasting. That's number one. But also because of the challenge that it gives me. And I know, and I carry it on in that, like, I know if I can go 20 hours without eating, or 48 hours that was my longest fast without eating. If I could do that, then what else can I do, right? What else can I do, and what limiting beliefs do I have that I can overcome is how I see it. And same thing with like working out. Like this morning I did my workout, and I wanted to do 100 crunches, and then I didn't want to do 100 crunches. And I was just like, all right, I got to like 75 I was at, and I was just like, everything was hurting, and I was like, I just don't feel like doing it. And I was just like, no, I got 25 more to do. I got this. Let's do it, right? And so again, that mental toughness of like, no, you got it, or chunking it to where it's like, okay, how do I make this work for me today? And chunking it. And so I look at it in my business and in my life is that when I'm dealing with anything at work, it's really not that hard, because honestly, it's harder to go without eating. It's harder to do that 100th crunch. That's actually harder because it's physical and you feel it. Whereas it's like making this phone call is only hard because I don't want to hear them say no. Right? So I'm interested in how this bodybuilding experience for you has also helped you in building a company for yourself. And if you ever, maybe you don't, but if you ever do lean on that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think some people disagree with this statement, but they say, right, the proverbial they, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm an all in or all out kind of girl.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a Attila the Hun, burn your boats kind of girl.
Right.
And so it absolutely does correlate with how I run my business, because you can't run a business effectively being partially in. Mm-hmm. Like you have to be completely devoted, and you have to be willing to surround yourself with people. So to be good at bodybuilding, you've got to have coaches. You've got to have people who can help keep you in line,
right,
and who can help show you the way. Because it's like what you think is the right thing, they're going to be like, well, no, you're doing fine, but I'm going to show you 10 other things that are going to make you 10 times better.
Right.
And I think in the world of business, I certainly absolutely take the same type of principles and I apply it to my business. Like the same thing, like you said, with like the workouts and, the eating, like it's 10 times harder to maybe like not eat something versus make this phone call we're afraid of getting hung up on or getting rejected.
Right.
But I think what I have found is just, I have this will to just go until, and it's how I do my workouts even. Like if I start to feel tired, I don't let up on myself. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh yeah, you feel tired? I actually talk to myself. I'm like, you feel tired? So then I increase the speed and I increase the weight and I increase what I have to. And I'm like, now you have to go 10 times harder. Like I use that in my business time and time again, because so much has happened. I can't even begin to touch the tip of the iceberg, the amount of horrific surprises I've had owning and running a company. Mm-hmm. And just being able to navigate through those challenges and to be resilient and to have the mental toughness to be able to push past the pain and the setbacks and the frustration and the hurt and the exhaustion. And I think, again, bodybuilding, you're so tired all the time, but yet you do it.
You do it, yeah.
You do it and you do it and you do it. And so it's like with my company, oh my gosh, I was tired all the time, but it's like, okay, I would get up the next day, 4 a.m., let's go. And, 17-hour workday. And the next day, 4 a.m., let's go. And it was just something where I think I had, and again, without me even realizing that this was all happening because I was supposed to be this type of individual, I had chosen all these unique paths to set me up for what I'm doing today. So absolutely, being in a deficit, right? I think that was huge for me, because being in a deficit and applying that to my business, being really careful and living off of nothing, because in the beginning of your business, like you don't have anything, you know what I mean? You have to live in a deficit. Like, okay, what can I live without? Literally everything,
right?
And having that tunnel vision and just staying focused, no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody thinks, like you're just like, nope, this is what I'm doing. And I can't tell you how many books and coaches and, I did the same thing in my business that I did with bodybuilding to be successful. And it absolutely correlates.
Yes.
And I can't imagine trying to embark on that journey without having had that conditioning first.
Yeah, and I see that. And I mean, I think, being an athlete is also plays a role into that.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And it comes in different ways. Like, you don't have to be an athlete to have the structure. It comes in all different formats. But for you, that's part of your story. And I want to get into the credit piece here, because you mentioned this earlier. I wanted to know why you love credit so much. And you talked a little bit about it, but just kind of like give everybody an idea of your journey there, in that like, you get a call from a recruiter and you hang up on him. You get him again, you hang up on him, and you're like rude to him. You're like, get out of here, dude. Like, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
But finally you go for it, right?
Yeah.
And you take this risk. And as you just talked about earlier, of like you're traveling all over the country and doing presentations on credit, and you start realizing that you're really helping people, and you start falling in love with this. And, you shared some of this in the presentation that I got to see of how you help people really understand, and you gave them some pretty easy and simple tools to at least start understanding their credit journey, I guess, to building better credit. And so I think if you could share a little bit of that insight for everybody to really understand what it all means of why do you love credit, and why is it so important for you to share this message of helping people with their credit?
Yeah. So it is funny because being called into it, like you said, I was like so rude to the recruiter, and I was just like, why would they ever want me to be in this position? I'm like, I know nothing about credit. I have no background in finance. My score is not that good, and I don't know why. And I will tell you all of the woes that my customers have suffered with, I've suffered with as well. And it's crazy because I came from such a good background and such a good family, like both my parents, right, 800 plus credit scores, and like they've never made mistakes in their life, ironically enough. But yet I find myself, when I'm in college, making all the same mistakes that my clients make. And it's what we call life happens. And then I find myself trying to navigate through situations. Like I assumed, so one thing we never discussed is, so I have a background in motorcycles as well. I've been riding motorcycles since I was 10 years old.
You are like the coolest woman I've met.
Again, I'm like my father's daughter, right? So like true daddy's girl. And so I buy a motorcycle at 19 years old, and I always wanted this gorgeous bike. It was an SV650S, fairing on the front, naked on the sides. Gorgeous, gorgeous bike. And so I buy this bike, and things are great, and job is good, and money's coming in, and then I lose my job, and then all of a sudden I can't pay for my bike. And so then I'm like, so my dad helps me, we sell the bike, but it ends up turning into, I guess, what we call right now, I understand it, but back then I was like, I guess it's a satisfied charge off. And so my thought process is like, so I'm never going to be able to buy something for 7 years. Like that's literally what I thought. Is I was like, okay, well now I've made this mistake, so I'm screwed for a 7-year time frame. And I remember thinking that at such a young age, and having no background or understanding given to me, it's a feeling of hopelessness, right? So it's like you're applying for an apartment and people are like, ooh, yeah, like you're gonna have to put an extra deposit down, or you go to get a car, they're like, ooh, yeah. And you don't even realize what you're doing wrong or how to do it any differently, because it's just not something that's taught in schools anywhere. And so navigating through these challenges myself, and just having and being put into situations where I felt really, truly helpless, because nobody seemed to understand how credit worked. And so being brought into the industry and being able to share and shed light on a topic that impacts every single person in the United States at some point in their life is so fulfilling to me. And, you've been in the audience. I love that aha moment, when people are like, oh, it's like these questions that everyone's like afraid to ask. And if you're looking online, like the TikToks and the Instagrams, there's so much nonsense out there where people are just trying to get you to buy something. So they're going to say something just to try to bring you in when it's not the truth. And I just wanted to share and enlighten people. This is what you should do when life happens. And having someone on the other end of the phone who can assure you in a situation that seems really scary is something that I just love. I love it. I love it. I love it. Because when life happens, it's scary. It really is scary. And like the desperation I hear in my clients' voices after they get off the phone with me, they're like, wow, like I feel so much better. Thank you. And I love that. I love helping people have peace around their situation. Again, there's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And again, it was something that impacted me at such a young age. And, so then, I go from 500s to now, 800s. It's a very different lifestyle. It's very, very different. And I just wish someone had taught me at a younger age. But again, it's not something our parents even understood. It was just back in the day, like when my parents were buying, it was like, you have a pulse and you get a loan. It wasn't, they weren't really looking at credit back then. So I love it because it really is a reflection of your financial health. And, just like I'm a big believer in overall physical health, your financial health really does make a difference as far as how easy or difficult your life is. And so I'm really passionate about helping people navigate through what I consider a very important facet of your life.
Yeah. What is a satisfied charge-off?
So when a company has, say you have a credit card. If you have a credit card and let's say it's Capital One and you don't pay it for roughly about 6 months, what happens is the company gives it verbiage, which is charge-off verbiage. And so when you owe a company money, your credit card, that debt is considered an asset to that company. And then once it's charged off, and they pay taxes on it. Once it's charged off, now they write it off in taxes and they give it verbiage, which is charge-off verbiage. And now it sits on your credit report as a negative item, which does a large amount of damage to the credit report. So it's just verbiage that a creditor will give something that, one, they no longer pay taxes on. And now it's also in collection status. So now it's something where it's a derogatory item.
So for someone who has this, so you obviously experienced this, and we're going to get into the positive, but what are the negative repercussions of this?
So a charge-off, once it hits your credit report, it's there to stay for 7 years. So the problem is with certain charge-offs, we're going to push a client potentially to pay it because if it's a credit card debt, right, that's money you spent, that's income basically. So these companies are going to come after you for a certain amount of time and they have that legal right. And so they can put judgments against you, they can garnish your wages. So once it's been paid, then it stays another 7 years on the credit report.
14 years.
It could.
Oh, could. Right. Once it's been paid. So it could pay in 3 years and it's just 7 years.
Exactly. Gotcha. So the problem is once the damage is done, it's now causing a lot of harm to the credit score, which means that you're paying a premium for whatever it is that you're trying to buy, right? So if your scores are less than, premium tiers, you're now paying an extra amount of money for your house, your, whatever it is.
So when you're applying for a loan, you might get the loan, but you're paying a higher percentage than somebody with a better score.
Exactly.
So you're paying a lot more for that money.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that's kind of the repercussions of a satisfied charge-off. And then for the company itself, like you said, they get to charge it off, so it helps them in terms of their taxes.
Tax
of some
liability.
Sort, right?
Yep.
Now, with the work that you do, and I remember this, is that there are, not that there's positive, I can't say that there's anything positive about this happening. Obviously, this is a situation that's hard, right? A financial hardship of sorts. But what you share is there are ways to fix this, of course, quicker, but also look at it differently to where it's not the end of the world. And so I'm interested if you could just share a little bit of that for everyone.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges I've had in my career, and even myself personally, the first year of being in the business of credit restoration, I really didn't understand what it was. I didn't understand what it was even capable of. I was like, wait a second. I'm like, how are derogatory items that belonged to a customer, how are they being removed? I could not figure this out. And so when it was explained to me, like for the 100th time, it finally clicked. And so the laws that govern the creditors and the bureau, so one of the many, many laws that we use to the very umpteenth degree is the FCRA and the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And it just basically simplifies, to simplify it, it just simply says that everything on the credit report must be 100% accurate, complete, and verifiable. It can't be misleading or obsolete in any way. And so in our world, we always made the joke, and I don't know if it's a good joke or a bad joke, but I'm going to say it anyway. Back in the day, remember O.J. Simpson? When they're like, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. It's the same thing, basically. It's not really about did you do it. It's more so can they prove it? Is it reported accurately? And sometimes when we're sending out our investigations to the bureaus, right, and then the bureau send it to the creditor has no interest in verifying it because maybe it's satisfied and paid and they have no interest in responding. They're like, whatever, who cares? Like, we don't have the time, money, or the resources. So you know what? We're not going to respond to the bureaus. We're not going to verify this. So then in turn, the bureaus remove it from the credit report. So then therefore eliminating that 7-year waiting period for the scores to go back up. So that's why in our world, everything negative has potential to be removed. And that's the key, is potential. There's so many companies out there that are just these fly-by-night companies that are looking to make a quick buck off of people. And they're making all these guarantees and these false promises. Oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, and use this letter and it's going to get rid of everything. It doesn't work that way. It's not magic. It's laws. You're building a case. You're scouring the credit report. You're combing through the credit report with a fine-tooth comb, looking for errors. And what people don't realize is that 80% of the items on the credit report are reporting inaccurately. And it's our job to point that out. And according to the laws, if it's not reported accurately, it's not supposed to be on the credit report. And so that's what we're able to do is persistently attacking the bureaus and the creditors and constantly pointing out the flaws in their reporting oftentimes results in these deletions of these derogatory items, therefore increasing the credit scores. And it's pretty amazing. We just had a young woman graduate from our program. She started with about 14 charged off accounts with balances. And I think it was probably about a year she was with us. And about $150,000 worth of charge-offs were removed from credit report. She started in the low fives, and she's now in the 800s. And again, it's amazing what's capable of coming off of credit reports simply because it's not reported accurately. It's amazing what can be cleaned up.
Can you also share a little bit of a warning here? Because I remember this being significant in that presentation, and somebody kind of fell for it. And if you remember, the gentleman talked about it, of falling for some of those we're going to fix your credit, and then it really is a detriment. And he also was a testament to that, of saying, it actually ruined everything. And you were giving a warning, and I think that would benefit anybody who's listening right now too.
So I think one of the biggest things is our industry is not very regulated, which is strange to me. And so I look forward to the day when it becomes more regulated. We are by the book. And so we adhere to every law that was written for our industry. But you'll find a lot of people will price gouge, and it's simply, again, they got into the business just to make a quick buck. And so they might send out some sort of like blanket dispute, and it's what we call throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, not really understanding, what should and shouldn't be done on certain types of accounts. And, some people will just throw thousands of dollars out the window hoping for this miraculous result and not realizing that they were just sold something, and it's not, these people want to sell this magic wand, but it's not. And it's just, when anything sounds too good to be true, it is. And that's one of the biggest things that I've always, and so people will constantly come to us and we refuse. Clients will constantly ask us to give them an absolute and a guarantee that this is 100% going to come off of my credit report. And we're sorry, we can't do that because I can't remove this. It's the bureaus, it's the creditors, it's a result of our investigations. If they have all the proof that we're requesting and they refuse to remove this, that's their right. So we really love educating the client, but also setting them up with realistic expectations, and making the program affordable as well. So it's not something, where they're going to be losing their shirts, for our program. We're trying to, provide a really wonderful program at a very fair cost. So hopefully we can get them into a better place. So I would just say, if you're hearing these outlandish numbers for credit restoration, well, first of all, people have always asked, can't I do this on my own? I'm like, yes, you can. You can do credit restoration on your own. It's the same way as, can you fix your own car? Can you,
there you go.
You can.
Right. Yes.
You have.
I could change my own oil, but it really is hard.
It's really
and messy,
especially now with the new cars and the new technology. But it's just one of those things. I just tell people, if you hear these outlandish prices, maybe run for the hills.
And there's that's for the credit restoration. But the other one that I remember you warning everybody about was the ones that when somebody is in crisis, and these companies that, that help with the debt collection.
The credit counseling?
Yes.
Oh my
That's the one that I was referring to. But I'm happy that you talked about that other piece too, because I didn't realize that.
Yeah, credit counseling. Oh my goodness gracious. So credit counseling is one of my least favorite programs on the planet.
Right.
So what it is, and in this time right now, so we have just hit over $1 trillion in debt in the United States of America in credit cards. So people are struggling with credit card debt. And this is on purpose. I won't get into that right now, but at the end of the day, people are looking for ways out of their credit card debt. And so there's a lot of these companies out there who offer what we call credit counseling. And so credit counseling is something where they say, okay, stop paying your bills, start paying us. So the only way that you can negotiate with a credit card company is to lower that balance that you owe them is if you start missing payment after payment after payment after payment, because now it looks like a hardship, right? So then you can go in, you can negotiate, and then you settle the account. Well, now there's a significant amount of damage done to the credit report when you miss payment after payment after payment. Like missed payments, 35% of your credit score comes from your payment history. So missing payments is very problematic. So these people at the end of the program, they're stuck with this probably 400 credit score, but these companies, right, so what they do is they'll keep your money in an escrow account that you give them every single month, and then they'll negotiate on your behalf to settle these accounts that have gone delinquent and oftentimes charged off. And so it might take them 3 years, it might take them 4 years, but a lot of people we're seeing, they end up in judgment status. They'll get taken to court. They have their, obviously like their bank accounts garnished, their wages garnished. Levied bank accounts. We'll see that all the time because these companies don't always give you all the details when they're selling you the program. And so many people fall privy to this. This seems like an easy out. This seems like the right way to go, not realizing the aftermath of what's going to be left over. So, you're going to struggle getting approved for something for a very long time because your scores are going to be so awful. So we try to tell people, if you're in that situation, avoid that type of program at all costs, because you end up paying way more than what the debt is worth. Anytime you add in a middleman, you're going to be paying a premium, and that's just a fact. And I won't name names of companies, but I really abhor the industry because I feel like it's preying on people who are very, very desperate. And I've heard owners of companies, very large companies, like speak, and they're like, listen, yeah, we are not concerned about their credit scores whatsoever. Like this is like, a last case resort. And I'm like, but you're not a last case resort. They can do this on their own, and they should do this on their own. You're making it sound much sweeter than it is, you know, and I just feel like it's just, it's a really sad thing to see people get into. And I've had really close friends of mine get involved in these programs, and like after having met me, I counsel them, and then we save them hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember you sharing that, and I thought that was so important for everybody here because, yeah, you do see a lot of that. And you mentioned TikTok, and that's kind of what reminded me, because you see that, come on in the feeds of sorts, whatever it is in terms of the advertising.
Yeah.
So
you start Googling, right, how to get rid of my credit card debt. Boom, you're a target.
You're a target, yeah. And, you built this business, and it was during COVID that you built this, right? You mentioned... Am I right here?
That's when I started laying the groundwork.
That's when you started laying the groundwork.
Yes.
And so, it's interesting because you mentioned COVID as one of your biggest challenges of dealing with, kind of everybody, right? Being the lockdown and everything, and being locked at home.
Yeah.
But it also is what helped create this business for you where you were working corporate, you were working for this organization and everything, and you came to this realization. Could you share a little bit about that piece with us?
Yeah. So it was really interesting. So I still remember when COVID was happening, and it was the day before everything shut down, and I was going into the city every day. And I went into the city like the last day before it closed down, and I still couldn't believe. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is going to be so weird, because I was an outside person. Like I was in offices. That's all I did. I was always in offices. And so now I'm like, okay, so my role is going to completely change. So I'm going to be doing all these meetings from Zoom. Okay, I can do that, fine. But my role changed completely. And so becoming very adaptable in this situation, like I did something that I didn't think I was capable of, which is getting on the phone and just being inside all day and spending, 13, 14 hours on the phone. I didn't think I was capable of doing that. And
it is hard.
But I fell in love with it. I really did. And I fell in love with my clients. I had never had the opportunity prior to COVID to really connect with customers, because I was only doing the business to business side. So I was only dealing with the loan originators and the agents and the investors and the brokers, and my team back in Colorado, they would handle the customer. But because I knew so much about credit, I was just like, why am I not dealing with customers? I can do so much more, because unfortunately, sometimes when it's passed off to maybe someone on your team that is just there to just be a order taker, the client's not going to get the service that I felt the client needed. And I had an aha moment. It was a pivotal moment in my life where I had helped a woman get her home from my instruction and my instruction alone. We closed her dream home for her. But if I hadn't been part of the process, she would have never gotten her home, because my team back in Colorado didn't and wouldn't help her in the way that I was capable of. They just needed some maneuvering on the credit report. Like we needed to move some positive credit around. It was so much more than just credit repair. I had to maneuver some things. And so doing enough maneuvering, we got her loan. And it was at that moment that I realized I had been beaten down, and it was something that I think that companies are so good at giving you these backhanded compliments to make sure you stay in your place and just know how small you really are. And at that moment, my confidence soared. And I'm like, no, I am capable of this. I can help these customers. I can own my own business. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I have to do this. I'm like, it is my duty. It's my obligation. I have this knowledge. I have to share it to people who need it, because no other company is going to take the time to go through the scenarios with these people, because all they look at people as a number. Like, how fast can I get them in? How, it was just like, it's just such a corporate thought process, is like how, like, turn and burn. And I was like, that is not the way. That is not why I got into this business. And so I started laying the groundwork, and I started studying my freaking butt off. But it was that very pivotal moment, and I'll never forget her. I can't say her name, but I'll never forget her. We're friends on Facebook, and she got her dream home, and it was a pivotal moment in my life, and it was because of her that I started my own business.
That's amazing. Does she know that?
Yes, she does.
That's awesome.
Yes, she does.
I mean, that's so cool. I'm interested in these backhanded compliments because it goes back to the idea of limiting, right? And I heard somebody say recently, we were talking about a situation that they're in, and I said, of course, Brene Brown, I'm sure you're familiar with. And I was talking about boundaries, and I was talking about setting boundaries for this person. And I said, it'd be great. It sounds like you need some boundaries. And she said back to me, I'm not good at setting boundaries. And you kind of reminded me of that with the backhanded compliment, because I said to her, do you realize that that's an affirmation that you're telling yourself? And
100%.
Where does that come from, right? If you're in an environment that you're thinking this about yourself, where does it come from that you're giving yourself negative affirmations, in turn backhanded compliments, right? So I'm interested in these backhanded compliments, and what I'm interested in is raising awareness to them for everyone of, like, what do they sound like? And you said they make you feel small. So what do they sound like, and how do we shift them into making us feel big?
Sure. And I think I remember one comment in particular is, Micah, you're too honest to be successful in this business. Let's just be real. And so being honest is a compliment, but saying that I'm not going to be successful because of it is obviously like, what? In
other words, you got to lie and cheat to be successful.
Yeah. And so, trying to say my honesty was something that was debilitating. I found, really kind of quite interesting. And so many times, I think also too, and it's not even always something that people say, but maybe getting passed over for maybe a promotion or, and there's little underhanded things. Well, if you just did this, then maybe we would have put you into this role, or if you would have just done this, and, but knowing full and well that you're doing everything you should be doing and more. And I just think I'm going to have to probably think a little bit harder about, what it looks like and what it sounds like, the backhanded compliments. But I just remember so many times things that were said, and I can't even remember a specific. Maybe you can say something that would jolt it.
Right.
But I just remember so many times like feeling like, I remember I would go into offices and people are like, oh, is this your company? And I'm like, no, and I'm like, I would never, I actually said this, I said, I would never go up against my company. And I remember that like it's yesterday, and I said it multiple times, thinking that they were so great and I was just incapable of, even touching anything even remotely close to what the product was that they had created. And, it was oftentimes, they were always magnifying how wonderful and how amazing they were, and how we were all so lucky. And, it was just paying us as little as possible and getting as much out of us as possible. And I drank the Kool-Aid, and I drank the Kool-Aid, and I drank the Kool-Aid, and I did it for like 7.5 years.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing was just magnifying how big they were and how small we were, and like, I just remember even like some of my team like would get picked on, if like maybe they were maybe they bought a house and, the owner would be like, oh, well, how much was it? And they'd be like, oh, it was $400,000. Like, like that tiny little thing. He's like, my first house was $1 million. Like just making people feel small, for, what I would consider a great accomplishment. And, there was just so many circumstances like that. And I don't want to paint that company in a negative light because I learned so much from them. But they were very, very good at making you feel very, very, very small and very, very replaceable when you knew full and well that you weren't replaceable.
Well, it sounds like in the experience that I've had with speaking with people like yourself in positions like that is, the company also keeps you so busy that you don't have time to look elsewhere. Yeah. So they keep you so busy. And what you were mentioning too, in terms of like this feeling of we're the best at everything and doing it in a way where they're putting others down. I think that there's something to be said about saying, hey, I am the best at credit restoration and I work my tail off for my clients. Yeah. But I'm not the only one who does it. Yeah. And I might not be the right fit for you. Yeah. So make sure you interview maybe 2 other specialists and come back to me with your findings. Yeah. There's something to be said about that versus I'm the only game in town. Yeah. And nobody else can do what I can do. Yes. Which is, again, that limiting mindset. Yes. Of, and manipulative.
Very manipulative. I think that's a great word for that.
In that sense. So, but I think it's very important for people to hear that is that, you can get caught up in these situations where you're made to feel small when you're really not. You're so much bigger and so much more potential. And I love your story here about like during the pandemic of finding the success story in it all and being able to build a business on that. You've also, you've spoken about your faith and many times and how you've leaned on your spirituality. But you also talked about service to your community. And you mentioned it about your dad and your parents and giving back and how you've never felt that you had nothing. And you always felt that you had everything. And it would go back to gratitude and appreciation for everything we have. But also when we give to others, we also feel like we have so much, right? Yes. And I know that you do so much work in your community, and I'd love if you can share a little bit about some of the work that you do in giving back. And I mean, of course, doing some free seminars is a huge way of giving back, but you also do more than that in terms of clothes and food and all the others.
So I'm a big believer, and it's not going to be anonymous if I talk about it. I'm a big believer in doing things anonymously.
Yeah, the anonymity is really more because you're like, I'm not looking for the pat on the shoulder. Yeah, in this situation, when I ask about this, I always put that as a part of my whole thing, right? Yeah. Because I really believe that it's important to give back to others. Yeah. So really, when we're talking about this, it's not about saying, hey, Micah, great job on donating. Sure. It's more about just sharing about the experience of giving back. So I appreciate that you like to do it anonymously. I think that that's wonderful. Yeah. But I also think it's important that people hear that, with great success comes, this need to also give back. And it's important.
Sure. I think what I want to focus on too is actually even my internal team, because
Please.
when I set out to start my company, I wanted to make sure that my team and the people that I work with and that work for me, that they never felt like a number. And I wanted them to know how appreciated that they actually were. And it's so funny because I think this goes to show like how trained we are as a society. It's normalized to just be a number. And so I recognize the people in my office, and I do it on a regular basis. And whether it's, like taking them out to get their nails done, or like we'll go out and like we'll have like special meals together, and like even just asking, how are you? And actually caring about them as a person and like knowing about them and their life. And it was interesting because And I love showering my girls with gifts. I just do. It's who I am. Like I love doing it. And it was funny because my right-hand girl, my director of operations, she's like, Micah, she's like, you make us feel weird. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, all these things that you give us, she's like, you make us feel weird. And I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, okay. I'm like, is that a me problem or a them problem? I'm like, that's a them problem. I'm like, the fact that we're so trained to not accept generosity from those, maybe that we work with or for, I find that to be kind of disheartening, and I actually learned that from one of my old COOs many, many years ago. She was like that with me. She was like my second mom, and she was just so generous with me. And, it made you realize, oh, I'm so much more than just a number. I'm an actual person. And I think recognizing people and just being as generous. And so like I pay well above, like what my industry pays, because I think that people are worth that. And, and then outside of that, I think it's so important what can you give back? You know what I mean? Like it's just, whether it's through the church, we do so much. The church that I attend is amazing. They are constantly putting on amazing. We do so many food drives and we do so many things that it's so personalized. They do so much for the community. And if you ever have an opportunity, like we love giving people like big surprise, like tips, like we love the diner, and so like one of my favorite things on the planet is like, if you can go like out to eat and like, you just leave like a big fat tip, you know what I mean, under that plate. Like I've never seen the face, but I would love to see their face, you know what I mean, like that when they get this, this big huge tip. Just
I could tell you.
Can you?
Well, not the big fat one, but yeah. I was a server.
Yeah.
And I remember getting some tips from people that was unexpected. Like you have the guest that comes and you expect a big tip from, and typically you don't get one from that one.
Yes, it's so true.
And then you have the guest that comes and you're just having a good time with them and they're kind to you and you're kind to them, but you didn't do anything above and beyond.
Right.
You just served them their meal. They asked for it. They didn't have anything. And you get a $50 tip. That was for me. That's what it was $50 tip. Yeah. And it just makes your day because for me, I was in college and you're working and you're getting $5 here, $10 there. And, if you get a big table and you actually, and it actually is just double the tax, you get a $20 tip, right? Yeah. But to have like the couple that comes and spends, I don't know, $30, it was at Chili's, spends $30 and leaves a $50 tip.
It's the best.
You're just blown away by the generosity. You're blown away by what people are capable of in their heart. And they don't even stay to watch, like you said. Yeah. They leave the tip and they're out. You can't even find them in the parking lot. They're gone.
Exactly.
I'm kind of like feeling emotional right now just thinking about it. Like I remember that. Like it makes your day. It makes your week. Right.
And I think that's what is so, this is amazing. This is amazing. But I think those types of things, I just remembering the people that we're right in front of, right here, right now, and what can you do for the people that are in front of you right here, right now. And I think I put there's so many other people in third world countries, and I think about it all the time. Like there's so much that my church does for all these other countries, and I'm like, that's amazing. And I love that they're called to do that and that they do that. And I'm like, what about the little boy or girl right here who's struggling to get their meal? And like, I just look at the people in my own backyard or the people sitting right next to me, like maybe paying for somebody's groceries, you know what I mean? Like you can tell when someone's in need, you can tell, just being like, hey, you know what? Like I got her groceries, or, just doing something, that is, it just goes around, it's like, I find like doing little things like that is so important, and just being kind to people as you encounter them. Everybody has always said, they're like, you're not from here. Cause I'm always genuinely, I shouldn't say always. I'm usually
it's hard to always
pretty happy. And
structure.
Yeah. And people are like, you're not from here. And I'm like, what does it matter where I'm from? Right. Like, I can be from New York and be happy. And I think that giving that gift of happiness and actually caring about someone and even like caring about how their day is actually going. Like I'm sure you've had the experiences, you meet someone, and whether it's, a clerk in the grocery store or someone who serves you food, you can tell when somebody actually cares how you're doing versus like if they're just like, come on, like get out of my line already. Right. And I think just giving people the respect of just, that human time, like, oh, how are you? And like just actually caring about them as a person. And there's so much more outside of that, that we like to do for our community. But I think those things are really important. So many people I think focus on like, well, I can't really give because I don't really have that much to give. And I'm like, well, if you don't have that much to give, sometimes a smile is enough.
Yeah.
Just holding a door open for someone is enough.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't have to be big. You know, generosity doesn't have to be this grandiose gesture. You know, I remember when I had nothing to my name, you know, and getting in my own head. I remember calling my therapist one time when I was in my 20s, and I was just like, I was so depressed. And I was so unhappy. And she's like, what have you done for somebody else today? Have you done anything nice for anybody today? And I'm like, no. She's like, well, that's your first problem. And I had like seriously nothing to my name at that point. And so I just remember walking out of a store and holding a door open for a lady and telling her she looked beautiful. And she needed that like you wouldn't believe. You could see the tears in her eyes. You could see like she just needed someone to give her words of encouragement. And who knows how long it had been since someone told her she was beautiful, you know? And I just think that it's so important that we always try to get outside of ourselves and think about others. And we always get so trapped in our emotions and our thoughts, like thinking like, oh, woe was me. But, you know, it can always be so much worse. And, you know, I just think it's so important to think of other people. And serving is such a big deal. And Tony talks about the importance of serving.
Yeah.
You know, he does so many amazing things, and goodness gracious, like there's so much that he does that I like to emulate.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's very healing. And I like that you brought that idea up of you can give without it being financial or material. Is like you said, a smile, a compliment. We're all capable of that.
Yeah.
Well, I can't say that we're all capable of that, because I'm learning now that, you know, there are inner battles and inner struggles that everybody has, that it is challenging to make eye contact and to smile at someone else.
Sure.
And like you just said, but the first step to maybe that self-love can come from just giving somebody a smile.
Yeah.
And can gives back so much. I really love that. You know, this kind of goes full circle for you, or for me with you, in that when you were talking about credit and you're like, I love credit and I love helping people with credit. I'm like, you know, I'm in insurance, right? And it's like, I love helping people with their insurance needs.
Yeah.
But the crux of it, right? Because like we didn't grow up wanting to be credit experts or insurance agents or anything like that. But the crux of it, and you're making me feel this and hear this from you now, is like at the end of the day, we just want to help people.
Yeah.
And credit repair, insurance, whatever it is the other person is doing, whatever else somebody else who's listening is doing, is the vehicle to help people. It's like, this is my vehicle. This is how I can help you. This is what I've learned about. This is what I got licensed in. This is, you know, what I've built a business on, or what you've built a business on, to help people. Because at the end of the day, that's what drives you. That's what you love. And I see that, and I hear that in you, and I see it in your speaking career and what you'll be doing, and in helping these women and men too, because you won't leave them out in the cold either.
Sure.
You mentioned that you have a course and that you have a platform and all these other things. Could you share with our audio listeners what some of these platforms are, how they can find them? And of course, it'll all be in the show notes.
Yeah. So my course is actually just something that I do out in the field. So I don't have an online course yet.
I love that. Put that yet in there, everyone. If there's anything you're trying to do, just put the yet in there, and it'll start coming. It'll start brewing. I haven't written my book yet. But we're brewing.
Yes, exactly. So as of right now, it's a very personalized program. So when people need assistance, they come to us, and we personalize everything, the whole experience. So we don't have an online course yet. But if anybody does want to interact with us or myself, simply just go to my website, which is just www.micahaabigail.com, and they can just request a free consultation. And, you know, we can discuss, you know, their personal situation, because it really is a fingerprint, you know, and everybody's going through something so unique. And some people are like, they just need to figure out how to pay down their debt. And some people just genuinely need to get their 400 to an 800, you know?
Yeah.
So whatever it may be, you know, we're here to provide the solution and hopefully make you feel a little bit better in the process.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I went to your website, and it is very simple. And I like that your website is not complicated. It's super to the point. I mean, it has this really cool impression. It's like, all right, we're dealing with the high-end firm here. I love that. I love that. You got this classy feeling to it all. But it's super simple. Like you can get an appointment and everything. And then you have this cool video on there. You know, I mean, me and the media, to me, I always like to see it and what's going on and how they do it. So you have this cool video of yourself on there. I'm interested in that video real quick. Yeah. On how you put that together.
Now, which one did you watch?
It's the one on the homepage, I believe.
Because I just changed it.
You're at a desk,
Okay,
And
so you
I feel
saw
like
the new one.
camera's panning. Yeah,
Amazing.
it was so well done.
So you saw the new one. That one's
Yes.
brand new. The old one was outdated. It was something
outdated,
that I had done in our old living room. But the new one,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I was so excited.
That's so cool.
I hired a videographer.
Yes.
And we did a ton of content. And I was like, I need something for my website. I want my customers to know who I am, what we do, what to expect, just get a little bit of a personal feel for, our company. And I needed that professional touch because it's like, I'm no longer a brand new firm. Like now we've got a couple of years under our belt. Our 2-year anniversary is actually at the end of October.
Nice.
So on paper, but I started, laying the groundwork 3 years ago. But I was like, okay, we can spend a little bit of money now, to make this a little more professional. And so I hired a videographer and he's like, so I guess we did it all in one take. Like we didn't have to do any retakes. It was just like, because I just know, I knew what I wanted to say to my audience, to my customers. And so it's a great video. He did a good job.
Yeah, and that came across, and it was done really well because, again, like I said, when I go to different people's websites, and check out, who's coming on, or even people that I'm working with or prospecting, whatever it is, if they got a video there, I'm like, let me see it. Yeah, let me watch it. And it's not all the time that I see one that I'm like, all right, what's going on here? This is a good one.
Yeah.
It's not talking about anything that I necessarily, am interested in right away, right off the bat, because obviously I'm watching it to get to know you.
Yeah.
But I was just like, it's done well.
Yes.
And I could see that. And
Thank
so
you.
I just wanted to put that out there. I thought that was...
Cheers to my videographer.
Yeah. Do you want to give him a shout out?
Dante Prime. He's the best. Yeah, he's
Dante
amazing.
Prime. Nice.
Yeah, he's very up and coming. I'm very, very grateful for him. Very
cool.
nice guy.
Definitely give him a good shout out.
Yeah.
So as we conclude, we'll end the way that we started because this is your mantra, which I love. It means so much to me too in my life. It's something that's helped me through so many challenging times. But it's that embracing life and that things don't happen to you.
Yeah.
They're happening for you.
Absolutely.
And if you can kind of just bring us back to that whole concept.
Absolutely. I think if we all have the capability of just reflecting on our lives, and if we can look at, oh my gosh, such a great book, The Obstacle is the Way. But if we can look at obstacles as opportunities, had I not had all these obstacles in my life, the character that I have today, the woman I've become today, I wouldn't be half of the woman I am today without the obstacles that were put in my way. And even Tony, talks about, we don't lack resources, we lack resourcefulness. And so having obstacles and having, things like whatever, alcoholism, whatever it may be, it's an opportunity to reach for resources. They're endless. They're absolutely endless. And they say that in 5 years from now, they say that you're going to be the exact same person that you are today, except for 2 things will change: the people you meet and the books you read. And so I just want to encourage people to constantly look outside of themselves and to be comfortable with self-reflection, and to not look at life as, when things are not going your way, it's not a woe is me. It's like, okay, what can I take from this? And every situation, it may not be right away. It may even take a year or 2 or 3 or 4 for you to find out what the intent was behind what happened, but it's there. Like, I'm such a believer, everything is intentional. Like, everything does happen for a reason. Even poor mistakes and choices that I've made, again, I'm a big believer, Romans 8:28, and I encourage everyone to look up that verse. But essentially, to break it down, it just basically means that God is going to use everything to his glory. Like, it's going to come full circle. So those who are called according to his purpose, it's all going to come full circle. And so, me believing in that higher power, I know that even the mistakes I've made, he's going to use that somehow to his glory. So the mistakes, like, having the alcoholism, like, these people who struggled with sobriety because of my story, because of me being sober, now they're sober, and had I not, that person might not be around today, so it's amazing to me to see, the lessons unfold. And I really, really believe it, because I hear it every day. The people and the customers that I speak to, like, oh, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. And, when we don't get what we want when we want it now, like, I think that is absolutely divine intervention. And I think that for myself personally, had I got what I had wanted when I wanted it, I wouldn't have been ready for it. Like, had I gotten my husband when I wanted my husband, I wouldn't have been ready for him. And had I, gotten, the career that I wanted when I wanted it, I wouldn't have been ready. And so all these things, and one person always told me, he said, Micah, especially when I was struggling being single, he's like, Micah, you are being groomed for him and he's being groomed for you. Just let the process happen. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, fine. But lo and behold, I was patient. And then, like you said, you found your dream woman. I found my dream guy. And it was just being patient and allowing myself to become the woman that I was supposed to be in order for these blessings to pour into my life. And had I not been through what I had been through, I wouldn't be the woman that Daniel was looking for. Yeah. Because he's looking for a woman of noble character.
Oh,
right?
I love that. Yeah. Noble character. That's such a good one.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. It's like you said earlier about the sobriety, and everything that you just talked about is that without the challenges that you had to face and that you had to go through yourself, you wouldn't be able to help the people that you're helping today. And so when I think about what you just said there about happening for you, it's like you care so much about people, right? And you want to help people. But if you don't go through some of the experiences you go through, then you really can't help all the people you want to help.
Exactly.
So because of your circumstances, because of all this, because you were able to be self-aware, internalize, reflect on it, and come back stronger, you can now help others. And it's so beautiful for you. And one other quote that you had put in here that you just reminded me of that I want to just share with everyone, which was, slow success builds character and fast success builds ego.
Oh, I love that one.
It's so good. And there's a lot of truth to it, right?
Oh, yeah. 100%. It's so on purpose, because like I always wanted, like, I'm like fast. And it's funny because God's like, no. Right. He's like, I love you too much. No. Yeah. He's like, no, it's not for you.
And you think about, like you said, your relationship with Daniel and like mine with my wife, Devin, and it's like, by giving it the time that it needed to become what it became or is today, it needed time.
Yeah.
Any relationship, just to kind of stay on the relationship piece with this, is like any relationship that was fast also ended fast.
Yes.
And it's like the same thing with success and money. It's like the fast money comes, fast money goes.
Yes. And you don't appreciate it. It's like this, you have this like false sense of ego. Like, oh, I'm so amazing. Look what I did. Right. And like, oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden, boom, you lose it. And it's just, I think it's so amazing when you have to put the time in. And I value so much my relationship because I always say, I'm like, I waited my whole life for him. Like I waited and waited and waited. 37 years old, I finally walked down the aisle with my husband, and it was worth every second of waiting because we have such an amazing life together. When you wait for that special someone, when you come to the relationship as a whole, right? And you're not coming to the relationship as, someone looking to fill a void. Like you're like, hey, listen, like I got what you need, you know?
Right.
And because of that, we have a really healthy relationship. And I think it's so powerful. And I hope that I hope this resonates with people. And I hope because I hear so many young people, I speak with so many young people and like, I'll hear like these 22 and 23-year-olds. And they're like, oh my God, I'm going to be single forever. And I'm like, what? I'm like, you're 22.
Give it time.
Give yourself some time. Yeah. But to hear the thought process that people are having at such a young age, like I never felt like that at 22, and I'm like, what is causing that? And so I think, I want people to understand the importance of just giving yourself time to become the person you're meant to be. And then the right person will fall into your lap when you're developed.
Yeah. And I think, pain causes that, of course, because of a bad breakup or something. It certainly causes that. I felt that way before. But I also think that we sometimes think that this moment is going to last forever.
Oh, of course.
And it's so important to realize that no moment lasts forever, good and bad.
Yes.
Is that you can have those low lows, but you put the stopwatch on, it's the same amount of time as that high.
Yep.
Not that it's exactly 10 minutes if it's 10 minutes, but I'm saying like the time moves the same speed.
Yeah.
So nothing is forever.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, it just changes the game on everything. But this has been awesome having you in here. I also want to make sure we throw out your handles because you also have like a great following on Facebook and Instagram and everything. So go ahead and share with everybody how to find you on those platforms.
So Instagram, I am Fit Credit Doctor. And then Facebook, I'm just Micah Smith. and LinkedIn, Micah Smith.
Awesome.
And those are my main platforms that I use. I'm more of an Instagram junkie these days.
Me too. I'm more Instagram.
I'm trying to go back to Facebook, but it's very hard.
Yeah. Instagram's a little bit easier to navigate, I feel like. It's
I
just
like it.
less clunky.
Yeah.
Which is funny because it's owned by the same people.
Yeah.
Interested in the name Fit
Credit Doctor.
Credit Doctor. Is it because of your bodybuilding background?
Everybody knows this girl is nothing but fitness and credit.
Nice.
Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. I came up with that handle probably like 6 or 7 years ago. And everyone was like, that's it. That's you.
Yes.
That's you. And I still remember when I was at my old career, or my old company, I should say, one of the girls was like, you realize you can never leave the credit game, right? She's like, your name is synonymous with credit, like whether you like it or not.
That's so cool.
I was like, well, I don't have an intent to leave the credit game, so this is good.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome having you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks
I appreciate
so much.
it. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.